In the world of luxury watches, certain iconic brands stand as beacons of both timeless craftsmanship and astute investment. Delving into this exclusive world, we highlight the masterpieces that have become symbols of elegance and fiscal wisdom. First, consider Rolex, the pinnacle of horological investment. Their sports models are especially revered, with collectors and enthusiasts alike seeking their sophisticated designs and enduring value. Rolex's commitment to excellence has cemented its status as a cornerstone in any watch investment portfolio. Turning to Omega, this brand's legacy is woven into the fabric of timekeeping history. Known for innovation and style, Omega's timepieces encapsulate a blend of classic design and modern technology. They are investments in craftsmanship and heritage. Audemars Piguet, a name synonymous with luxury and innovation, has seen its creations rise in value in the secondary market. Each piece is a testament to the brand's dedication to excellence in watchmaking. Vintage watches also hold a special place in the investment landscape. Their historical significance and unique stories make them highly desirable to collectors, often eclipsing the allure of newer models. Each brand represents a chapter in the grand story of luxury watchmaking, a narrative of excellence, precision, and enduring value.
Gary, I want to ask you about your top picks for luxury watch brands, the big brands in 2023.
Well, if you look at auctions, there are two brands that matter: Patek Philippe and Rolex. And you look at the big auction houses, and particularly Phillips, which is the leader, I think. And you look at their catalogs, the watches that get good realizations and that either meet or exceed their estimates are Patek and Rolex, and that's been true for some time. In terms of the market writ large, in the intro to this section, you talked a little bit about Audemars Piguet. They're not everyone's taste, but on the other hand, they've done a great job of making the migration into being more of a fashion and lifestyle brand. So, to horological purists, maybe some of the things that they're doing, particularly with their marketing, but also with some of the special edition watches they're making, are not to people's taste, but they've been enormously successful. Richard Mille, which is a smaller brand, kind of almost an independent, big Formula One presence, and the prices of those watches have skyrocketed. Dan's giving it the thumbs up.
Verstappen, bro, Verstappen.
There we go.
F1.
I'll go get my hat.
Yeah, good. Well, and there, I won't have an F1 argument with you right now, Dan. But you think of kind of who's coming up a little bit. Cartier, which for a long time I think people saw as kind of a jewelry brand in a way relative to watches. They had a time where they were making these unbelievable, fantastic, big complications with Carrefour Forestier, and that really didn't work for them. But now they've gone back to classic styling and some, very clever work with the visuals of the watches and, new versions of their crash watch. And, I have a good friend, and Dan, you probably know him, Eric Koo, who's a big Cartier collector. And, I think that's kind of, if I had to think about it, that'd be a place to think about as well. Among the big brands, I'm a big fan of Langa and Zona, the German makers. If we're talking about watches that hold and gain value, maybe not so much, but they're fantastic watches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dan, you called yourself a horologic manipulator.
Horological manipulator. Yeah. I was just, what am I going to brand myself with out there in La La Land? So, master. I'm not into that kind of stuff. But horological manipulator fits in time, what watchmaking is right now. That's what I do. And that's what a lot of my friends do as ghost builders for some of the brands that Gary was talking about and other, the large brands that are called independent, but they're pretty, almost billion-dollar companies at this point.
Well, you had a role at a big brand, and then many of your independent friends also ghost building for big brands.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, why consider a big name brand? And I also want to ask you about like budget. What do you think I should be budgeting for a first watch purchase?
Well, I think what's happened in the last 15 years, because I used to be a vintage restoration specialist, and my specialty was Patek Philippe's, because there were no more parts anymore. That's what my service centers did. Make parts that really no one in the United States was ever making wheels and pinions. Back then, there was no internet or anything like that. So unless you went to Switzerland to a select school like mine, you didn't know how to do any of that. So those watches that used to be like a Man on the Moon Omega and Pateks will come across my bench all day. I could have bought a used Man on the Moon for $850 every day of the week. That is now what's considered vintage watches now, and it flipped, and they become extremely valuable, and the market fluctuates and I always recommend that watch to everybody. Buy yourself an Omega Man on the Moon. I don't care. Pick your style, Man on the Moon. Don't worry about investing. It's not terribly expensive. And that's what I was going to recommend to you, Andy. It'll stand the test of time, and that's what I tell people to invest in the lower tier. Meaning what used to be $3,800 now is about $10,000. Maybe you might get in just a little less than that, and get yourself a Man on the Moon, and you can wear that every day of your life. You can beat the snot out of it. You can wear it from the beach. You can wear it to the moon. I mean, you can beat the crap out of it. You can drop it on the ground. It'll last you until you're gone, and then you can leave it to somebody else. If you want to keep moving up, you can, buy yourself a Rolex. Some of them appreciate. I mean, I'm one of the only two watchmakers ever to be inside the second most expensive Rolex in the world, which is the Rolex Zerograph for Phillips, actually. So they do appreciate, to millions and millions and millions, but really don't bank on that. Buy what your heart tells you, but know what's inside if you're going the mechanical route. Meaning, do a lot of research, because there's smoke and mirrors everywhere, and it's not a quartz battery watch, which and watchmakers don't call those a watches. They aren't. They're wrist computers. Before we had wrist computers, it's a battery with a circuit board, and most of the time they're around $20 to $35 for somebody to just replace it when it goes bad. You don't fix those. So if you're in the lower $1,000, $1,500 range, nowadays that's probably what you're going to fall into. So it's more of a fashion thing that fits you for that time. Still a good thing that tells time, but it is more of a fashion thing than something where you're actually paying for what's inside the watch, meaning a mechanical timepiece. 90% of what you're paying for is for that micro machine that I build here from raw metal. That's why watches are expensive when they get to be handmade. We have to make every wheel and gear and pinion and everything. It's not a circuit board and a battery.
The Moonwatch
sorry, I've got bad news for you, which is from the brands that I mentioned earlier. For your first watch, any watch you want, you're not going to get. It's kind of the bad news, So if you say, "Gee, I'd like an Audemars Royal Oak, maybe a steel with a blue dial," you're not going to get that. If you say, "I'd like a nice Rolex Daytona, chronograph in steel," you're not going to get that. Patek Nautilus, I'm sorry, you're not going to get that. I think the Omega Moonwatch is a great idea. There are other watches out there, and we can come back to that, I'm sure. But one of the problems, as someone who's new, is what used to be entry-level watches for the big makers. The steel sport watches are now the hype watches and have gone up a lot in value, and production is limited, whether that's naturally or artificially, and they're very, very hard to get if you don't have an established relationship with the brand. So unless you have the patience to go through that initiation and say, well, maybe I'll buy a few pieces I didn't really, really want, but I'm going to get such and such at the end of the highway. I think going some other paths is going to work out better for you.
Mm-hmm. Is the Moonwatch, that's a stainless steel chronograph?
It's a chronograph that comes, well, now there's 37 different flavors, but there's one that's the predominant Moonwatch, and they brought back the original movement as well, but then they get a little pricey. And there's one that has a ceramic case with their newer movement. A movement, for those that don't understand, is that's what we call the machine inside. Sometimes you'll hear someone say it's a caliber or a movement. That's the machine inside, and that's what you're paying for. It really is, a basic movement is just maybe 220 parts that have to be manufactured from raw materials. So,
how much does a Moonwatch go for used?
Probably more than a new one, right, Gary? Depends what model. Yeah. It's that vintage thing again. That's where you start falling.
Is that right?
Prey. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because watches that I bought new at retail in the 1990s are now called neo vintage. It's the new thing, and so. Like, great, I can hardly wait for the value of these things I've got in the back of the safe to explode. Of course, very few of them ever have a chance of that. But yeah, I mean, a 30-year-old watch now is getting to, as you say, Dan, getting into that territory of collectibility and the value movements up and down cyclically that you expect of something that's a collectible object.
See, Andy, it's no different than what happened to the vintage watches than what happened to cars. When watches would come across my bench, and pretty much every make there was that was a good watch. I'm Rolex certified and pretty much certified for most of that stuff. If something was really destroyed or somebody went swimming with it or whatever, it was retired. We just said it's just not worth repairing because they really were. A Rolex was $3,800 for a Jubilee, or what, maybe pushing $4,800. It was retired. It really wasn't worth my time as a watchmaker because the invoice I would give you, it doesn't correlate. So I would take that. They would buy a new watch, and then that goes in my parts drawer, and I just used whatever's usable for parts for somebody else. And that went on and on, just like cars. So it depleted what was out there. So the supply and demand for vintage watches is driven the price relatively high for specific models.
You guys have reminded me that in my family, there's a rose gold Rolex. I don't know what type, but my grandfather owned a rose gold Rolex, and I am not, I'm too young to have inherited it. My older cousin has it. But since we're having this discussion, it reminds me that I need to talk to him because he has no kids. So maybe someday, if I outlast him, when he expires, I'll be like, Fred,
if it's
don't forget that watch.
If you remember, if it's maybe a little bit petite, then it would. If it's rose gold, more than likely it would be probably a bubble back.
Yeah, I think it is a bubble back.
Yeah.
So I'll talk to Fred.
Grab it while you can, because again, what's inside those timepieces? When I open up those timepieces, as a watchmaker, we look inside and go, now that's a watch. See, that's what we care about. We don't care about if the dial is pink and blue and it has 37,000 diamonds on it. I mean, I worked at Chopard, one of the biggest diamond jewelry, companies in the world. I mean, there's people, I did watches that had so many diamonds on everything. I didn't even see the watch anymore. And then the lady says to me, not good enough. I want to feel the diamonds. I want them inside. We're like, what? Nobody's going to see it. She didn't care. Just, I want to feel them inside. And then she had one of the early clips you had on the show here showed the show part with the spinning diamonds in there. I mean, it's to each his own, right? But more than likely, watchmaking is a bad disease for collectors and people who really fall deep, because as soon as that watch is given to that person, because it went from there, then she wanted black diamonds. It was good, but the yellow diamonds weren't enough. Now I want the same version in black. It's that disease, no matter if it's for fashion or it's for the mechanics, like it's for perpetual calendar, or you want one of my detent spring escapements because there's only 2 of us in the whole world that actually build this thing. If that's your thing, you fall in deep and the disease hits you, like someone who collects Ferraris or someone who collects Camaros. There's just different ends of that spectrum.
good to have wealth so you have choices. Let's go to segment 3.